So, welcome to Culture Unscripted, the show where we cast the net wide to explore the people, ideas, and practices that are reshaping workplace culture. I'm your host, Jess Bridge. So, today we're talking about something that every workplace cares about, but struggles to do really well, and that's mental health conversations. How do you check in with a colleague when you're worried about them? How do you balance care with confidence, especially when you're not sure what to say? To help unpack this, I'm joined by Ben Lucas, a mental health advocate, educator, mental wellbeing consultant, and corporate speaker. Ben has dedicated his career to helping organizations build psychological safety and real capability in mental health, not through policies or posters, but through conversations and true compassion. In today's chat, we'll explore Ben's personal story, what he's seeing in workplaces right now, and the simple but powerful ways we can show up better for one another. Ben, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Excellent. So, Ben, before we jump into workplace wellbeing, I'd love to start with your story. So, what first drew you into the field of mental health?
Well, I think it was kind of an accident for me. Like I've always said, I've had two kind of accidental careers by trade or profession. I'm a marketer and a marketing strategist. And mental health was something that started as just like a passion project for me and then kind of became work. My path in there was sort of two key moments or events. What I found in the mental health space is like most people that are in it have some sort of lived experience or connection to usually a challenge around mental health seems to be like the jumping in point for people.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the experience of losing my dad to cancer when I was in high school, and he was sick for sort of 4 years or most of my high school life. And so I had a bit of a different upbringing. And then the years after high school where I was in my early 20s and people around me started to take their own life. And there was 3 people that I knew who took their own lives in about the space of 18 months. And so I guess the way I've turned those experiences into work is talking about this kind of gap or this contrast that existed for me, which was when my dad was sick and people could see that I had a really good support system. And I think like I credit the way that I am able to talk about that experience to the system, the support that I had. But then there were these young guys in my life that I was jealous of that I thought had everything together and they were quietly struggling. And so for me, it just felt really unfair that, I wanted to be like these guys and they were suffering so much that they were trying to escape from life when I was being taught how you kind of fight for life. And so for me, it just it didn't match up. And I felt like I was just motivated to explore that, I suppose.
It's interesting how you sort of notice that gap where, there's what you see versus what someone is experiencing and how to bridge that gap to, going into someone's world or how they're feeling.
For me, it started as like a conversation or looking into like really masculinity. And like I was a late teens, early 20s bloke. And so my experience was like who you're supposed to be as a man and how you show up as a man. And this kind of metaphor that always gets used now is like the mask that we wear. And as I've gotten older and been in this space more, I've seen that's not just the male approach. It's really like we all kind of do it. People talk about social media and people putting a front on there, but it's not just a social media thing. I think it's something we've always done. It just manifests in a digital form a lot of the time now.
Exactly.
But it is that kind of human behavior of we're just wired to try and fit in and to be something and hold up this image. And that's just not how life goes. So we struggle when we feel like we're not meeting that expectation, and then we're just not creating the channels to talk about that or to share.
Yeah. And masks are a form of protection. When you think about masks and what they're designed initially for, it's actually a form of protection to, and in the modern world, it's a form of protection to hide how we really feel or how we want to show up.
I think, when we talk about it in a work sense, we call it imposter syndrome. And then I find that like we only use that term when we're talking about work. And then when it comes to anything in life, like we still feel imposter syndrome, but we don't label it as that. We kind of just label ourselves as a failure. To me, it doesn't really it's the same thing. We have these kind of two different buckets, but they're so interlinked and intertwined. I feel like it would almost do us a favor to be able to say, hey, I feel imposter syndrome about, who I am on my life, because
Yeah.
it's a way to actually like acknowledge it or verbalize it. But we just
Yep.
don't have the language to say, hey, I feel like I'm not good enough or I'm struggling or I need help.
Yeah. Or the vulnerability. So
Mm.
was there a personal moment or experience that changed how you viewed mental health? Or made you kind of want to go, look, I'm going to dedicate my career to this, or this is where I need to be and I don't know why, or I do know why and here I am.
Yeah, I don't think that for me it was like one big moment. Like I talk about the kind of big things like losing a parent and losing
Yeah.
friends, and those are definitely like the kind of
Mm,
milestone sounds like the wrong word, but the key events in the timeline. But I think it
mm,
was like the culmination of lots of smaller events that kind of
mm.
sit under those umbrellas. I've just always been a talker. I was my my year two teacher sent me to a like public speaking course when I was 7 years old because she said,
Wow.
yeah, she said to my parents, she was like, this kid just loves to get up in front of the class and tell jokes and be a class clown. And that's just, I think, when I'm being myself in front of people, that's where I feel most myself in a strange
Yeah.
way. It's like it kind of
Yeah.
brings me to life. And so I always knew that I would or felt like I was drawn to talk in front of people. And then I didn't really know what that looked like. So I went to radio school. I thought I like to talk. Maybe I'll be on the radio, and
Yeah.
um, always did different sort of speaking things or found ways to get myself
Mm,
talking in front of people. But it was kind of purposeless. And then once I'd gone through some challenges, I guess my way to draw like some sense of meaning in it was like, well, maybe this is the thing that I'm supposed to be talking about.
mm,
So I just started talking about it because I'd always wanted to. I think maybe like to pin down an event, it was the fact that when my dad was sick, all my mates would
mm,
say, "How you going? How's your dad going?"
mm.
Um, and then once he died, all those questions stopped because people
Yeah.
just felt awkward. So it was actually getting a bunch of mates together and calling them out and saying, "You used to ask how I'm going, and now you don't." And like
Mm.
that's not what friendship is. Like that's not being mates. It's actually asking me how I'm going because a tragedy's happened. Um,
Yeah.
and then I just realized that like, oh, people find this really hard. And
Yeah. Yeah.
to me, I've always been like a talker and fascinated by people. And so I guess that's the marketing side of me that comes out is
Yeah.
like, why do people find
What's
this
the
hard?
psychology?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess
Mm.
it became or felt a bit like a superpower or strength of like, okay, I'm good at something here that people aren't. When I talk about it, people say that it's admirable or it makes them,
Yeah.
express things as well. So it just kind
Mm.
of like that's why I
Just
say it
kind
was
of
an
like a
accidental.
match made, yeah. Because
Yeah,
sometimes, like, yeah, I love talking and public speaking, but, if you get to a point where, like, if I'm not truly passionate about something and there's not a message I'm delivering, I'm just talking for the sake of talking.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
to kind of,
exactly.
end up, through fate or just through experience or just being right place, right time, or just leaning into
Mm,
it and saying, there's actually something really cool here that I want to talk about and I want to use the skills that I've got to bring it into, the world.
yeah, and at
Amazing.
school, it was
Yeah.
like it was a way to get out of basically to get out of doing work because I was not I wasn't interested in my academic part of school, but school for me it was just this like community that whenever I got in trouble for being a bit of a class clown or an idiot, and I ended up at a principal's office, I ended up in a counselor's office, not a detention. And so I kind of
Yeah.
knew like, okay, these people can see that I'm a good kid that's acting out. And
Yeah.
so I would put my hand up for things like any sort of like charitable thing we could go and volunteer at, or like I'll read things
Mm.
out at school assembly, or I'll go and talk to a class about like why they should come and join cross country or whatever it was. I just found
Yeah.
like all the extracurricular stuff kind of distracted me and kept me busy. And it was
Mm.
stuff I was interested in doing. And then
Mm.
when it got to the workplace, it was like, yeah, I'll be a fire warden, or like I'll run the team, like the company stand up meeting and kind of like host Friday drinks or whatever it is. It was just ways to like feel like I was being a part of something or orchestrating, like I guess bringing people together in a way is like probably the other tie-in for it.
Yeah, amazing. I'm gonna fix my light in a second.
That's right.
But I'll answer the next question. My light just sort of flew down. Um, you've been in the space for a while now. What keeps you passionate about it, and what's still meaningful after all of these years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that anytime I speak to a room of people, whether that's like a presentation or running a training or a workshop, it's
Mm,
never the same. And stats around mental health is like 1 in 5 Australians will experience a mental illness in any 1 year. So in
Mm.
any room of any size that I speak to, someone's experiencing a hardship or knows someone who is and is like a direct uh, associate with someone who is struggling.
Mm.
So last week I ran a mental health first aid course, and I've run that course, I was going to say hundreds of times, but maybe that's an exaggeration. Lots. I've run
Lot.
that course so many times. Um, and every time I run it, you get different stories, you get different questions. I present the content differently because of the feeling in the room and
Audience.
where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
Um, and it just feels like it's kind of never finished. Like
Mm.
I don't feel like I've learnt something and then I'm like a university lecturer that is then delivering this content and explaining how this thing works. It's like
Mm.
it's still a personal growth journey for me, and I still go through hard times and then learn new things, and then that changes the way I talk about stuff.
Yeah.
So it feels like if you talk about like growth and kind of it's always difficult as well. There's
Mm.
times that I get emotional still, and so it feels very I'm not comfortable. Well, I am comfortable, but like, it's not boring. It's not like
No, there's still a
yeah,
stretch there. There's still, like, more to learn. There's still more conversations to have. There's
yeah,
more refinement here or, a question someone asked in a workshop and you're like, "Oh, haven't had that question before," and you might
yeah.
go right back and research it and be like, "Oh, maybe next time I'll include this." So, yeah, there's still a scratch there.
And
Yeah.
the other part of it is just the sense of like reward, I guess, that you
Mm.
it's we're human, we do everything for reward. And so like when someone comes up to you after a session and shares something
Yeah.
or tells you how much they got out of it, that is like the richest form of like
Isn't it?
feedback or reward for me. I've had people message me that I don't know on platforms and say that I've helped them through something or helped them navigate a relationship challenge that they're having. And like,
Mm.
there was a weird moment for me where it started with helping my friends, and I was started off with this sort of mental health project, and I was posting on social media. And
Mm.
I remember when it shifted from like my mates being like, "Hey, it's awesome you talk about this stuff," to strangers asking me for advice. I was like, "Wow, this is really like
Yeah.
the way I'm presenting my thoughts
Mm.
and ideas is actually resonating with people." And that was really like, that's probably what has driven it is like, okay, there's something. I
There's
kind of
something.
laugh. People talk about when work is stressful and they say like, we're not saving lives here. And then I went and worked for a suicide prevention charity, and you're kind of like, well, we actually are. And sometimes you get
Exactly.
reminded when
Yeah.
you do something and you get anonymous feedback that,
Mm.
the organization you're working for has saved someone's life. That's very like, very empowering.
Incredible. And I think it's just through your own bravery
Mm,
of talking about things that initially you open up a conversation and then it's awkward, right? And
mm,
it's, oh, are we going there? And like, you can feel awkwardness in the room or might feel like, oh, I've posted something and this is raw or whatever. But it's through
mm.
that bravery that people then kind of, their masks come off and they're like, oh, like finally someone gets it, or oh, finally I can just go blah and say how I'm
Yeah.
feeling as well. Um,
Yeah. There's a lot of,
yeah,
like there's some certain exercises that I'll run in workshops
yeah.
where you essentially get people to role model or show vulnerability without having to talk at all. So
Mm.
asking questions and getting people to step on and off a line, essentially, if they agree with it or not.
Yeah,
And
wow.
the way you frame or ask the questions is that everyone has this freeze moment where they think, what if I'm the only person that steps forward here and acknowledges this
Mm.
thing? And what happens like 10 out of 10 times, it's like a magic trick, is that everyone is going to step forward with the same answers. And then
Yeah.
when you have a bit of a debrief and a discussion afterwards, people are like, I thought I was going to be
Mm.
the only one that felt that way. And then I stepped through the discomfort of acknowledging it and I looked around and all these people I work with feel the exact same way. And then the conversation is
Yeah.
really easy because it's like, well, if we all feel this, why aren't we talking about that? Why do we think that we're
Yeah.
struggling and no one else is? And then you can have a really healthy debate about it. Because it's
Mm.
kind of the parallel I would draw is almost to like some stand up comedians I like who just make observations of things. Like the humor is like, don't you think it's funny how we all do this thing and then we have a laugh about it?
Yeah.
I think mental health is the same thing. It's like, don't you think it's weird that we all keep these insecurities to ourselves? And if we're brave enough to acknowledge them, everyone is like, yeah, I feel like that too. And you're like, oh, I'm not alone. We actually are far more connected than we think.
It's
But we
so
need to, yeah, take those
yeah,
masks off or put the
yeah,
walls down to actually see it.
yeah. Like you, like I've always been fascinated by people
Mm.
and reading people and, like just understanding how people think. And I've come to the conclusion that we're all incredibly unique and different in our ways, but we are also very similar as well. So
Yeah.
there are patterns that, you think are so nuanced to yourself that you pretty guarantee that everyone is had that thought or,
Mm.
has that quirk as well. So it's like, yeah, that real parallel of both.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
tried to explain like therapy or counseling or psychology to people
Mm,
like that, or explain it in those terms to try
mm,
and get people to try it, because we have this idea of I'll be lying on a couch and they'll be asking me how I feel, and it's like something from a movie, which is not really the case. But
mm,
um, the way I look at psychology is like somebody went to uni for 5 to 8 years to study
yeah.
how people respond. As you said, we behave in patterns. You're
Mm,
not the only person in history that's felt this way or experienced this thing. And when
yeah.
you walk into a session and you talk about something that's happened and they can pinpoint like how you might be feeling, why you've responded a
Yeah.
certain way, it feels a bit like having like your mind read or having like a horoscope read,
Yeah.
where you're like, how did you know? And it's like,
Yeah.
there's patterns to this. And so if somebody has gone to uni for 8 years to observe those patterns, they have a pretty good idea of what's going to be helpful off the back of it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but I
Yeah.
think that it's such a valuable tool, but I think it's such a barrier that people have.
Mm,
Um, but for me, that certainly changed it for me, where it was like, okay, I'm not in there. This person's going to think like, I don't know what to do. They're going to know what to do. They're not going to know
mm,
how to make me, well, not make me feel better, but give me tips and tools on how to navigate it myself. So I actually
yeah,
feel more confident with, addressing stuff.
exactly. So from your perspective, how are workplaces doing when it comes to supporting mental health? Have you seen a real shift, or are we sort of still just scratching the surface? Because I think
It's
we've come a long way, but I'll leave it to you to
Yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
you're right. We've come such a long way just in the language that gets used, and the legislation around actually needing to create safe work environments is probably helping us
Yeah.
a lot. But it's still so case by case. With Formind, where I work, we can tell really quickly when we're talking to an organization if they are taking things seriously or if it's just a
Mm,
box tick. And so that really
mm,
comes down to leaders and leadership and how bought in they are. I
yeah.
think the pendulum is swinging, I guess, that more and more
Mm,
people are being bought in and seeing the benefit.
mm,
But there still is a long way to go. And I think, like
mm,
anything, there's going to be bad managers. There's a lot of people in management that don't feel equipped to deal with
mm,
mental health or wellbeing challenges. So I think that's the next phase. Isn't like, okay, we know how important this thing is. It's then this generation of people that feel that imposter syndrome with having to be a manager and deal with people's stuff.
mm,
I think that what's happening in the workplace is this meshing of work and life. They're
yeah.
like, they're no longer separate things. It's not this four walls that we go into and do a job and then we go home and we're in a different box. Like,
Yeah.
we all work from our bedrooms and living rooms now. They are the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, but so much of how work has been constructed for hundreds of years is that they are different, or you treat them differently and they're different
Mm,
conversations and you behave different ways. So it's a massive change that has to happen,
yeah.
to know what's acceptable at work, what's comfortable, what should we be addressing, because then there's other parts that are, privacy boundaries and too far and whatever. So
Yeah,
like,
how far do you
it's really
go without
confusing. Yeah.
without baring your soul to your manager or something? But yeah, like
Yeah.
we're used to compartmentalizing and being work mask, home mask,
Yeah.
female mask, male mask,
Mm.
So what are some of the biggest myths or misunderstandings you still see around mental health at work?
I think mental health as a term is like,
Mm,
it's got a bit of a PR problem. When we talk about mental health, we're almost always thinking negatively. No one ever
yeah.
talks about their positive mental health.
Mm,
And it's quite medicalized, because as far as the spectrum of mental health goes, there's mental health, there's mental
mm,
illness. Um, and so I think people don't understand the language, and the language is not super clear. So
mm,
I think when people talk about mental health, it's like, oh, that's heavy stuff. You've got lots of things going on. They don't
mm,
think of it as this like we're all in a state of mental health that's fluctuating from positive to negative, and we should be sliding
Yeah.
up and down that scale.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just think it's so like it's this scary little thing that like we talk about when we're in crisis and we don't touch it otherwise. And so
Yeah,
that means that
I love that scale because we fluctuate, we're humans,
mm,
and we have pockets and patterns and chapters and seasons of our life, and sometimes daily moments. And like it's not just you're either got a mental health issue or you haven't. It's like it is such a scale.
yeah. So the
Yeah.
framing is almost like go to HR or tell your management if your mental health is really bad and you need help. But
Mm,
there is like so many steps before that point that we
mm,
should be getting supported. Like to go to the work and home thing again,
mm,
like you need to be able to show up to work as your best self. And
mm,
if you're not your best self because things are going on outside of work, but you're not able to talk to your work about those things, you're
mm,
showing up at 50, 60%, and they're wondering why you're underperforming and no one's
mm,
acknowledging the issue. Like if you have good work for a good company, have good bosses, good managers, and you're struggling outside of work, they are or should be invested in that because they
mm,
might have support and resources that they can give you to help navigate that stuff.
mm.
Otherwise, their approach is kind of like, well, can you go and sort out your home life? Because like we've got a lot of work that needs to be done. That's
Yeah.
not the answer. The answer is like, hey,
Mm,
we might have some tools and resources we can give you. Maybe we can make some adjustments in the way that we work,
mm,
or we can be aware of when you come in and you're high stress or you haven't slept or
mm.
whatever the issue might be,
Yeah.
and actually support the person to be their best self out of work. And then would you
Mm,
believe that their best self is going to show up to work rather than
yeah.
like this divide that exists?
Well, it's like that concept that's going on at the moment of like human workplaces. Like
Mm,
we're all human at the end of the day.
yeah,
So you can't expect peak performance all the time. You can't expect high performance all the time.
that's
People go through phases, and it's just, it's the sustainable, the sustainable practice of just looking after people. Um,
a word you just said then.
mm,
Like piqued my mind. Something we're seeing a lot of in the mental health and wellbeing space is the word performance. And
yes,
so
yeah,
a lot of these platforms are like wellbeing platform to improve performance, and we're obsessed
mm,
with performance because it makes it like a business outcome or a metric that we can
yeah,
track of like if people are healthy and happy, they're going to perform better. So let's measure performance and then use that as the indicator for people's well-being, which I don't think is right because there's a lot of type A high performers that are performing at a high level, incredibly stressed and like on the edge of cracking. That's how we
yeah,
push people to the edge.
yeah,
It's not a clear indication. And I would love to see less well-being support or solutions or platforms using performance language as
yeah.
a metric. I understand it because I have to sell mental health and wellbeing services as well. So I understand needing to show a business the ROI,
Commercial
the
lens or
effectiveness.
like, yeah, what ROI you're gonna get on,
Yeah.
the performance of your team.
Yeah. I just
But
don't think
I
we should
struggle with the
be.
word performance as well because it leans to a performance. Like,
Yeah.
what I mean? The other term of performance is like you're rocking up, you know, like, pretending or
Yeah. Yeah.
performing. So
Acting.
I struggle with the word performance so for different reasons. So,
It just
I get
doesn't,
it.
I don't feel like we should be talking about how we like optimize and enhance and improve performance of our people. It's like we're not machines, we're not engines.
Mm,
There's got to be a better way. And I don't think we like the better way because it's more hands on and it takes more work. And in a bigger
yeah,
organization, that's harder. So it's not scalable. But
yeah,
it's it's really, really important. And I think the human part of workplaces you're talking about, like AI, everything now, is going to become more important.
mm,
I don't want to go to a job where I just tell machines what to do all day. It does it all
mm,
for me. Like that's very unfulfilling. And I
yeah,
think or hope that what work becomes is more collaboration and creativity between people,
mm,
which is going to involve like we're going to need to look at how people interact because a lot of people could become very siloed and isolated through this like
mm,
automation and optimization of everything.
yeah,
Um, and it's great for some things, but in my cases and or my opinion, and in the case of many businesses, that's not where the
mm,
best work happens. The best work happens
yeah,
when you get people together, whether it's
yeah,
in a room or online. Um, and I think that's why we work. We don't just work to output.
yeah. And I think it's what I'm passionate about is that connection and belonging as a huge driver for the well-being of team. And the more automation and the more technology we use, the more disconnected we get. But yeah, just bringing people together and not losing ourselves along the way. So
Yeah.
when it comes to leaders, what makes starting these conversations so hard around mental health or mental well-being?
I think we just don't. Well, we don't have them. They don't exist. So then, if we have to try and talk about something that we don't know enough about, we feel unprepared in, like it's going to be
Mm,
hard. It's going to be scary. So it's just that we're not even touching them, and I think we're so afraid
mm,
of getting it wrong that it's easier not to do it sometimes and just leave it out of sight, out of mind, than put yourself out there and give it a go. Um, yeah, a lot of advice I give people is about like just trying to start the conversation. And I think the mistake or the trap that people fall into is that starting the conversation becomes, hey, if you're struggling with your mental health, make sure you speak up. And we just encourage people to go and get help if they need it. And then we don't put anything in place that is actually going to reduce the barriers of why they wouldn't, or we don't do
mm,
anything to role model vulnerability ourselves or normalize help seeking. So you
mm.
kind of just sound like somebody on a soapbox saying, like, it's really important to get help if you need it, but we're all good over here and you should be too. It's a bit of
Yeah.
a trap because I've sat in so many rooms, everyone nods and says, yes, like, are you okay? Get help if you need it. But then the actions don't ladder up. And so I think
Mm,
it's kind of the old school method of leadership of top down, and we need to flip it and go, how do you start with the action? There's a piece of research I've used 1,000 times in strategy work around this American guy who went to Toyota factories in Japan and looked at how they sort of drove culture, and they had this like traditional model for culture in the US, and they found out that the Japanese were doing basically the complete opposite and
mm,
flipping the model. And rather than putting our values on the wall and saying, we're going to live by these values, now go and behave like this, it was actually started with the actions and was like, well, what are we actually, how are we going to operate and how are we going to act? And then why don't our values come out of that and end up on the wall? So
yeah,
you don't tell people what to do and then they go and do it. You actually start with how you're acting.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which sounds really great in the theory. It's really hard in practice. Like it's a lot of work because you're like, yeah, great, let's do that. Let's start by talking about how we do that. And then you're in the trap of doing the same thing again. So actually
Exactly.
looking at what is our culture? Like what are the moments that we have where we connect in the week? So
Yeah.
um, something I love seeing people do is like break the model of team meetings. I
Uh,
did a presentation the other week for a business who's changed up their Monday morning meetings. It was like no work updates, no
mm,
like, how was everyone's weekend on a call of 20 people with like, that's not connection.
no.
They've gone, one person's going to present every Monday. They're going to teach us about 3 interesting things. And it could be
Yeah.
whatever about them, things they're watching at the moment. Like, let's create a moment of connection. I
Mm.
think we lose how much actually like knowing the people you work with or knowing some things about them is really important.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to um, we have to be so intentional now. And
Mm,
before you go into an office, and you're like, oh, great, you catch up with someone, you have a coffee, and you end up naturally talking about, how your weekend was, what was great, what wasn't, what's going on in your life, and you build those connections, and you form that sense of belonging.
mm,
But now it's like managers can't just rock up on a Monday and hold a meeting. They have to sit down before the meeting and go, what am I, what mood, what feeling, what emotion, what mindset am I trying to evoke in this Monday morning meeting that's
mm.
going to create whatever space I want to create? And they
Yeah,
need to have the tools or the ability to know what to say, what kind of activity they can create in that moment to then build trust in the team or build
mm,
belonging or connection or collaboration or whatever it might be.
yeah,
Um, and it sort of goes on to my next question around remote and hybrid teams where we don't always see each other's cues.
yeah,
So, it's incredibly, we call it Zoom doom, where, it's actually really hard to read body language on virtual meetings because your
yeah,
brain is working overtime to try to figure out the nonverbal cues of communication, which is like 90% of communication.
yeah.
But do you see new challenges emerging for mental health support because of hybrid and remote in particular?
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm experiencing that now where I'm from home 4 or 5 days a week. So our team's
Yeah.
rarely together.
Mm.
And I've caught myself sending more messages to people after meetings and saying, "Hey, just so you know, I wasn't trying to be rude then. Like, this is where I was coming from," because I've had to explain my tone or body language in a way that
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't like how I came across there. Um,
Mm.
and if I don't acknowledge that, because I previously probably wouldn't have, it could become
Yeah.
a tension point, and I might not
Yeah.
even know. The other thing that happens is we have this like, we're having too many meetings for the sake of meetings. Let's get rid of meetings so we can be more productive. But then we're not talking to each other because
Yeah.
we have to have meetings to have FaceTime. So there's a
Yeah.
weird in between where like I'm not going to
So
chat to you in the
true.
kitchen for 5 minutes, and I'm not going to say good day and go and get a coffee with you today. So
Yeah.
when are we going to create those moments? I think
Yeah.
it's really, really hard. Um, I think, yeah, finding unique ways to do that is really important. We have a highs and lows call on Friday afternoons for about half an hour where we just all talk about our high and low and best meal of the week.
Yeah.
Um, and like we spin a wheel to take turns on who goes. There's no work chat, and then we all log off on a Friday after it's done. And like that's
Amazing.
kind of our version of Friday drinks virtually, and everyone looks forward to it now. And there's little in jokes and quirks of the company. Like our
Yeah.
culture is kind of formed out of a Friday afternoon call where we don't do any work.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes for people that might seem boring or like, oh, this is lame, like icebreaker activities and like corporate fun exercises that they don't want to do. But we have a pretty diverse team. Like when you have salespeople and product engineers and marketers, you have a lot of different personalities.
And I find they're
Um,
the best interactions when you do that. And
yeah,
you know what? They do sound corny and they do sound, you know, icebreakery and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff. The reality is like you run them and people actually enjoy them. Like
yeah.
they end up kind of going like, yeah, I feel good and what a great way to finish the week.
It's kind of it gives us all permission to be a bit silly. Like you just lean
Yeah.
into it. And I think it's, yeah, on surface level, they seem kind of, I don't know, cliche or whatever. And I think the other thing a lot of companies do is they do the Monday morning because it's like, let's start the week, say hello, and then go and do everything. They probably don't do the Friday
Yeah.
afternoon. Like
Yeah.
when are you doing it when you're not in let's fire up and like let's be productive mode, I think is
Mm,
important. Um,
mm,
and then one-to-ones, like we have lots of one-to-ones with bosses or managers or founders, but we always
mm,
talk about, and I credit having a good founder that does this, is like he will always start with what's going on personally and actually asking those questions and having interest in what you're up to.
mm,
Um, like we're human beings, that's kind of how we operate. And just doing that on even a small level,
mm,
um, you might know one thing that someone in your team does on
mm.
weekends, that a hobby they have. Just keep asking them about that.
Yeah. Be genuinely interested.
Yeah,
So let's get practical. So if I'm worried about a colleague, what is the best way to start that conversation?
I think I cover a lot of this in mental health first aid training. So a conversation I have a lot of the time is, yeah, how do we approach or how do you have the conversation with someone? And one of the big challenges I think is that we're too scared. When I teach that course, I say at the start and I say at the end of the course, like, what I want you to take away from today is not a framework of how to have the conversation and all the questions you should ask, because it's not a checklist and there's no right or wrong. It's the confidence to actually have the conversation. Um, I
Mm.
usually swear because I get passionate, but I'll stop myself now. But I say to people all the time, you are better to F it up than not have
Yeah.
the conversation at all, because nobody that you've checked in on is going, man, I wish they'd asked me this, or like, I check in on someone and afterwards I'm like, oh, I forgot to do this, or I could have done a better job or whatever. They're not thinking like they didn't do a good job of checking in on me. They're like, oh, someone acknowledged me and recognized that, or
Mm,
said, hey, I noticed you've been a bit off lately. Are you okay? And sometimes that's all it is.
mm,
The first one is like, have the confidence. I talk about stomping on the eggshells. Like we tiptoe around things because we
mm,
recognize that someone's stressed or not being themselves or has been off. And so we
mm,
kind of go like, oh, there's something going there. I'll step around it so that I don't upset them or set them off, or they don't think that I'm
mm.
looking at them differently. It should be the opposite. It should be, hey, what's going on with you? You're not being yourself.
Yeah.
Rather than like, oh, let's pretend it's all okay and maybe they'll feel better. That's just not how it works. I
Yeah.
understand why we would do that.
Mm,
But I think once you give people the confidence to go start the conversation and don't try and fix their problems, just be a set of ears. My mum always said to me growing up, you have two ears and one mouth, use them in that order. Uh,
I love that.
yeah, ironic for someone that became a talker for a living, but I think part of being a good talker is also being a really good listener.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just give people a platform to share and express and ask them lots of questions and ask follow-up questions,
Mhm.
not just, "Hey, how you going?" and then move past it. Like
Yeah.
if you say, How are you actually going? What's been happening? How have you been feeling?" Like just framing
Mm.
the question differently so they have to give you a more of an answer,
Yeah.
um, is like you can't get it wrong. You're being curious and
Yeah.
you show that you care. And yeah, the barrier is that we're not confident in having the conversation because we think we'll upset people or we'll get it wrong,
Mm.
and we don't know what to do if they say they're not okay.
Mm.
Um, and it's a team sport. That's probably one of the other things I've learnt about mental health is we treat it as this like personal thing, but like we're
Mm.
social beings, we're a part of things. If we treat it like a team sport, it's not like you need to get better, I need to fix you. It's what can we do? Is it how can we help you
Mm.
feel better, deal with whatever is going on? I think that framing just makes it a lot less isolating as a challenge.
Yeah. And then what's the next step after that? Because sometimes it's like, great, I've got the confidence. I'm going to say, look, I've noticed things are a little bit, I could be reading into it, but I've noticed
Mm,
that you're not contributing as much in a meeting, or
yeah,
you don't, you kind of be a bit distant at the moment, particularly if it's remote.
yeah,
Or I've just noticed something's not quite right. Is everything okay?
mm,
Um, the next part of that is like, it's like that saying, you don't wanna be the one stuck holding the baby. It's like now they do a dump and it's like, "Oh
yeah,
my gosh, like, what do I do with it now? What's the right thing to say to make them feel better?" And I think that's the natural instinct is to say, "Well, it's gonna be okay," or, "I'm sure
mm,
you'll work it out with your partner," or, like, "Things can't be that bad." You end up kind of rambling around trying to make them
yeah,
feel better in that moment. So what would advice would you give once
yeah.
you've got the, yep, they've opened up and that they've kind of
Yeah, I
bared.
think there's like probably 3 parts. Um,
Mm.
the first 2 are pretty clear, and then we'll kind of figure out the third as I talk. But the first one is like acknowledge or like listen, acknowledge their
Mhm.
experience. So whatever they have been going, sometimes it's like, "Oh, I've had all this stuff going on." It's
Mm.
just validating like, "Hey, that's a lot." Like, it's okay that you're feeling like you're overwhelmed at the moment because you have a
Mm.
lot of stuff going on. Like then and that would be hard to deal with and not like I
Mm.
know what that's like, but I can imagine that's a lot. So I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that, or I understand that like that's quite a lot to deal with.
Mm.
Second one is practical support or advice. Like, let's make a plan on what we can do, so that you have like an action plan or some takeaways
Mm.
essentially. And I say practical because like it's really got to come from them. If you
Mm.
like just project, here's everything you need to do, it might not work for them, heaps of barriers, but figure out
Mm.
like, hey, what's going to be helpful? Here's maybe some stuff I know, like we've got an EAP I can put you in touch with. Like I highly recommend that. Um, the third one is like, yeah, basically, if it's at a level, professional help. Like, and it's the good way to describe it is like palm it off because it's not actually, if you're a manager, it's not actually your job to fix anything to do with
Mm.
someone's mental health unless
Mm.
a poor work environment is the cause of that. So if
Mm.
the thing that they're struggling with is anything other than something that sits within their role, your job is not to fix that. Your job is to acknowledge their experience,
Mm.
connect them to professional help, and then hold them accountable. Like,
Mm.
say, let's do a check in, or I'm going to be here to support you. I'm going to make sure you do stuff because it's actually really hard when you're struggling to take positive actions. It's way
Yeah.
easier to just be a victim, be woe is me, be down in the dumps. Like, it's a spiral. It's very hard.
Mm.
Having a supporter or somebody who can kind of
Mm.
not do everything for you, but keep you accountable, pull you along is really empowering. And
Mm.
then they've actually got somebody to celebrate when they do take a positive action. So if they do go and try counseling or use an EAP platform or whatever the positive action is, encourage them for that. It's like that reward of like, I was struggling, this person acknowledged it. They helped me take a positive action and then they celebrated the fact that I did something for myself. That's so much more
Mm.
empowering than having to handhold and do everything for that person
Yeah.
because that's not going to teach them how to deal with it. I guess maybe some of that language sounds like strange, but what I learned being in this space was like, you can't fix everyone. The classic phrase is,
Mm. Yeah.
you can lead a horse to water and you can't make it drink. The challenge
Yeah.
with mental health challenges is that you don't have a conversation with someone and give them some things they can go and do. And then they
Mm.
call you the next day and say, hey, I've done it.
Yeah.
Like mental health is a slow, painful process. And sometimes it takes weeks or months for people to turn things around or take positive actions. And so it's a real patience game. Like it's
Mm,
not like a manager conversation. Hey, I'm struggling with this task. Okay, here's some things we can do. Go and do that. And then next week, check in. How are you going? Hey, that system we put in place really helped. There's a real chance that you do that check in and they say, I'm still struggling. I still feel bad. I feel worse than
mm,
before. I tried
yeah.
something, it didn't work. And then you've got to do it all again and be patient
Mm,
and be supportive and empathize with that person, not get frustrated, not judge them. That is really hard to do.
it is, yeah.
Um, Someone said to me once, and it always stuck with me, is like, you only need that person to take the help once. Like they only
Mm,
need, there's a video in one of the training courses that says, someone who went through something says, I like only needed the chance to get help or get better. And sometimes like that's our job, isn't to fix people, it's to give them the opportunity to get help.
yeah.
And I
It
think that
creates a
framing
turning
is
point.
important.
Yeah, and it creates a moment and a you know, I was such a huge believer in the power of words and moment. So, I think we can all think of times in our life where someone has said something that has literally changed a course of how we think or what we do next.
Mm,
And sometimes as a leader or manager, you might have that conversation and this particular person might have, some challenges ongoing, but they might look back in 5 years' time and go, well, it was that manager at that job that started me on this path. So
yeah,
yeah. And I
yeah,
think, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, but, when a leader, or a manager has, a team member that really is struggling, you're mentioning before, it becomes like a 2 to 3, 5-month process, and the manager has the pressure of, we're talking about before, performance or,
yeah.
KPIs, and, they're getting pressure about how their team is showing up or performing, and then
Mm,
what can a manager and leader do when it becomes like I can't it's beyond my control.
yeah.
I want to provide the support, but I've got I've got to hit my goals here. So
Mm.
what's your advice there?
I think there's probably like two ways to look at it. I think
Yeah.
the first one is the wide lens, which is
Mm,
managers, HR, anybody that manages people. The
mm,
system we have for supporting people is reactive. So it's
mm,
someone comes to us when something's already gone wrong or they're already struggling or the performance has already dipped and we're dealing with the consequences of that. So the
mm,
true result is we have to get to proactive support or a
mm,
proactive safety culture where the people in your team know where they can get help. They have channels to report stuff or flag stuff if they need it. The getting help has been normalized, it's accessible, and they actually access services before they get to that point of crisis or they're
mm.
really struggling.
Yeah.
And then you're not having as many conversations where, hey, we've got to fix this mess that we've got, or we've got to pull you out of this hole because we have less people falling in the hole. Like that
Mm,
is the gold
absolutely.
standard that we want to get
Yeah.
to. The reality is that that's not how it works at the moment. We've got a
Mm,
system that is, we need to pull people out of the hole. It's really hard, and it's really hard to separate what is a performance management conversation and what is a mental health conversation. And
mm,
sometimes you have to have both. So if you are dealing with someone in your team who is struggling, my suggestion is you're actually having two conversations. If you try and do it as one conversation, what happens is you're both in your head having conversations for a different reason. There's a book called Super Communicators, which I've been ranting to people about recently.
mm,
Talks about three things that people do that make them super communicators, like people that everyone just kind of connects with. One of the things he talks about in the book is what conversation are we actually having? So if
mm,
you think you're having a conversation where you're supporting someone, if they think you're being their manager, it doesn't matter what you do because they think they're being criticized and they are never going to be honest and open with you.
mm,
So if someone's not performing, I would say have a conversation with them, which is like, hey, this is where things are at. This is what we
mm,
need to do. We need you to do a better job. That's a hard conversation. After you've had that, either immediately after or soon after, you want to
mm,
grab that person again and you want to say, hey, this is not me as your manager. This is me as a human being. That's work. This is a
mm.
separate conversation. We can talk about performance and things we've got to hit and whatever. But if there's other things going on, there's also things we can do for that. And it's got nothing to do with your job or your performance and whatever. And
Mm,
that actually tacking that on to the back of the management conversation is like a huge weight off someone's shoulders. If you're struggling and then you're criticized by a manager, you feel like you're not performing, it's like the
mm,
pressure gets even lighter, or sorry, even heavier.
yeah.
If they then acknowledge that, like, I know that there's other stuff going on and there's help that you can get for that
Mm,
stuff too, it's like releasing the pressure valve. It's like, oh, I've been acknowledged as a person, not just as a worker.
mm,
It's such a difficult space, but I think where people get stuck is having them both as the same conversation. And then from the lens of the employee, it's always, I'm being criticized for not doing a good job. That person probably knows they're not showing up as their best self, or they know they're not doing a good job, but they
yeah.
feel helpless to fix it. They don't feel like any sort of performance management plan or,
Mm,
work-based thing is going to solve it, because the work is not the root cause of the problem.
yeah.
Um, so it's quite nuanced, but I think that is like,
I think you're
that is
so
the
right. Yeah,
yeah.
I think we try to merge them together, when they're actually 2 separate things. I
Mm,
mean, the performance, so to speak, is an outcome of, what that particular individual's, going
yeah.
through at that point in time. So,
And the
yeah.
challenge is you get somebody who's good at their job, becomes a middle manager, gets very
Mm,
little training on how to manage people, but suddenly they have a team because they were a high performer.
mm,
And when they do have to manage that team, the sort of expectation is they're managing them around performance. So
mm,
that's this like kind of gap we've got in workplaces, I think, of managers that don't know how to have those two conversations, or have never
mm,
been, they've probably never even thought of it. And so the default is like, I'll go to the performance side. And then you get the people below them going like, I've got a bad manager, or I've got a manager that
yeah.
doesn't
And I'll
understand.
just ignore the stuff that I don't know how to talk about, don't know how to deal with, but
Yeah,
this I know, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And
yeah.
sometimes even the performance conversation is for a new manager, not an easy one either. So they're
Mm,
kind of debilitated by both these tough conversations, at the end of the
yeah.
day.
I think the
So
only last bit I would add to that is, if you're going to have those two separate conversations, is do the performance piece first, because it's a bit of like a slap in the face to go, hey, I care
mm,
about your well-being and your mental health, but now I'm going to
but pull your
criticize
socks
you
up.
about your work performance.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, rip the band-aid off and have the performance piece first, then come in and be supportive later.
Mm,
Because I think the other way can feel like a bit of a break of trust, of like, you
mm,
came in to support me and then you turned around and criticized me for my work performance and told
mm,
me I needed to improve these things. So I think the order of the
is
conversations also,
important.
yeah.
Yeah. So in closing, and what would be the main 3 things that you would want anyone listening to take away from this conversation today? A manager or leader or organization? What would be the 3 things that you would say, would be the most important takeaways for you?
Yeah, try and summarize it with like three punchy headlines. First, first one is like, no one has any idea what they're doing when it comes to this stuff. Like, that's the
Mm,
biggest barrier, is realize that like no one has figured this stuff out. People
mm,
have said to me for years after presentations, or whenever they see me do anything, is like, how did you get into this? Are you a psychologist? Did you go to uni? I struggled with that for a long time because I hadn't, and I thought you needed a uni degree to talk about this stuff. I just say to people like, no, I've been a human for 30 years. Like, that's really the answer, is I've been fascinated by people. I've had some, abnormal experiences. I've had brilliant managers. I've had bad managers, and I've just
mm,
learned from that and started talking about it. And the fact that no one is means people are like, hey, there's something to this. We're not having this conversation. So I think when we realize that no one knows what the hell we're doing, it's a bit of a
mm,
relief because we can stop pretending.
mm.
The second one would be, um, the second one would be probably just like off the back of realizing that no one knows, is like, just give it a go. You can't get it wrong. Um,
Mm,
it's I guess like the barrier to entry is so low that if you show any form of like vulnerability as a leader, or just being human, or showing interest in people, like,
care,
it's, yeah,
willingness.
care.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and don't worry about performance numbers and optimizing whatever. Like, I guarantee you that stuff will come. The
Mm,
third piece that I would give, which kind of is probably words that in a better way, is treat it like a footy team. Like,
yeah.
I was a vice president of a footy club, and it was a new club, so it had no culture. And me and basically some other young mates built a footy club.
Mm.
in our early 20s. And I think most of the like lessons in leadership that I've taken was from being in corporate teams and then being like fascinated in how you build culture in a sporting environment.
Mm.
Um, I was in a team that had like a really diverse range of people because I didn't play like rugby league or AFL or rugby union. I played American football, helmets and
Mhm.
pads and stuff. And so the weird thing about the makeup of an American football team is that everyone is completely different.
Mm.
When I played rugby, like everyone was a rugby guy, or you play cricket and everyone's a cricket guy, or whatever it is. But trying to figure out how to make a diverse group of people buy into a common thing, it taught me so much. I think there's like, it doesn't have to be sport, but look at different ways that people come together and connect for common goals. And kind of like, I think putting that lens on it sometimes breaks the corporate workplace stuff. Like I've got lots of mates that are tradies, and I'm interested in like a mate who's worked for a landscaping
Mhm.
business for 12 years and had the same
Mm.
boss and works with the same 8 guys. And, they haven't, he doesn't want to go and do anything else because he gets paid well. He loves his job. He loves the people he
Yeah.
works with. Sometimes in the corporate space, like we are in such a bubble and you can read so many things on LinkedIn that give you all these ideas. But I'm like, where are the other groups of where people hang out and people do things together?
Yeah.
Sport, like social clubs, whatever it is. I think they're the lessons that we should put more into business because like there's enough business textbooks and all that stuff. Like we've done all that stuff.
Yeah, there's so much we can learn. I love that because I always think that there's so much we can learn
Mm.
from sporting communities and clubs,
Yeah.
and just
And
the
sport might not be
ritual.
everyone's thing. Like sport
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a thing, but everyone has like community groups that they're a part of or um,
Mm,
can observe, I think. Yeah.
yeah. Um, well, thank you, Ben, so much for such an honest and empowering conversation. I think we could. I can't believe how quickly that time went. I think I could have. I think we could have talked for another 3 hours and still only just scratched the
Yeah.
surface.
Yeah. That was
Um,
awesome.
yeah, but what I take away is that supporting mental health isn't just about the right words. It's about just a willingness to ask, listen, and care.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most powerful things we can do as leaders or colleagues or friends is to simply just create the space for someone to feel seen,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and noticed and acknowledged, and open up that dialogue or just show that you care.
Mm.
So for those of you listening, maybe think about a person you can check in with this week, not because it's a campaign or a calendar date, but because that conversation might matter more than you actually realize. So this has been Culture Unscripted, where we shine the light on people and ideas transforming workplace culture. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone that might need to hear it, or leave us a review so more people can find these conversations. Thanks for listening. I'm Jess Bridge, and I'll see you next time.